Welcome into Always the Jags. It is your host, King Whale, and today we are doing something. We are only hours away from the draft. It's coming up on Thursday, so we're very close to it. And so today we're doing something very special where I'm going to draft the entire first round as part of my mock draft for the first round because for Jaguars fans, where we're picking is a very uh, we have specific needs as well as we want to balance need with best player on the board. So with this mock draft, we need to kind of know where each player is going in order to make sure that we're going to get the best value for the players that we want and the players that we need. So today we are doing a mock draft of just the first round, just so we can make sure, see what kind of position the Jaguars will be in by the second round and make sure we can get our guy in that first round. So here is my official round one mock draft. So starting off as number one overall, Chicago Bears drafting Caleb Williams, probably the worst kept secret ever. No surprise there. I think what they got for Justin Fields was like pennies. I thought he was at least worth a fifth round pick, maybe not a high, I mean, at least worth a first round pick, maybe not a high one, but I could have seen the Raiders or the Broncos having to deal their pick. But they shipped him off for only a fifth, which is crazy. But either way, Caleb Williams going to go into a room with two number one wideouts, so I think he's going to be just fine. Next, the Washington Commanders take Drake May. Again, similar situation. Um, Number two overall. There's some smoke that they might go Jaden Daniels. I think Drake May just has a stronger resume, and I think at this point mock drafts are just trying to spice it up when they put Jaden Daniels because he's a good player, but I think Drake May is like if Caleb Williams wasn't here, Drake May would kind of be that guy who was the far and away number one. You know, if you're not always like the uh for sure the number one guy, sometimes they try to move you around, but Drake May is the number two guy. Then I have Jaden Daniels going at number three to the Patriots. I have a friend who's a Patriots fan, and I could see them going Marvin Harrison instead, because they have Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, and he can hold it down for a year. They know they're not really going to compete that much. The question is, do they like the quarterbacks in the 2025 class? From what I heard, the 2025 class might be just as bad as the 2022 class is. And so for Patriots, it's, do you want to go ahead and grab a guy here, or do you want to get a really good receiver and see if you can grab a guy next year? So I could see them going Marvin Harrison. In this scenario, though, they take Jaden Daniels so he can sit behind Jacoby Brissett for a little bit, learn. I think they'll be very patient with him. Next, at number four overall, of course, this stops Marvin Harrison's slide, who's arguably the best receiver in the class, best player in the class. And the Cardinals, ironically, take him after he's been regularly comped to Larry Fitzgerald. And, like the Packers, like haven't had a quarterback problem since Brett Favre. I mean, the Cardinals have had receiver issues for a couple of seasons, but they've had some of the greatest receivers on their team, from Larry Fitzgerald to DeAndre Hopkins. And that continues here with Marvin Harrison Jr. At number five overall, I have the Chargers taking Malik Neighbors. Now, some might say this is a little that the Chargers will go offensive tackle with Jim Harbaugh. He likes to run the ball. But at the same time, Justin Herbert, you have Justin Herbert as your quarterback, right? He's going to throw the ball. And Quentin Johnson and Joshua Palmer just can't be your top two options. They just can't. So I don't see how the Chargers don't take one of these draft guys who is projected to be a number one wide receiver in the NFL because that's what they're saying about all these guys. And I think unless Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors were all off the board by five somehow, I think the Chargers is going to end up taking one of those three guys in this spot. Next, we've got the Giants. Here I have the Giants taking Rome Odunze. Before I had the Vikings trading up into number four. But then I realized after people are thinking that the Vikings are going to trade to number four, but I think the Vikings are still going to get their guy without having to trade. The Vikings did trade, then the Chargers end up with Harrison, and the Giants end up with Malik Neighbors. As much as paying Daniel Jones 40 million a year is going to haunt them for a very, very long time and was a terrible decision, they can't undo that this year. He's stuck. So you might as well get a top flight receiver so that way the next guy that you bring in will have someone to play with. I don't think it's the right move for Giants to go ahead and bring in a quarterback right now. They made a mistake. They've got to live with it, and then next year they'll be able to try and fix that. Next, we have the Titans at number 7. And I would love to just have them forfeit their first round pick for being a terrible team, as a Jaguars fan. I feel like we should have that right. But unfortunately, that's not how this mock draft works. So the Titans are going to take Joe Alt. No surprise there. Best offensive lineman in the draft. Arguably, and again, Joe Alt, I could see him going to the Chargers or the Giants. I think just the idea is around the NFL having a wide receiver one, like a designated wide receiver one, has been so beneficial to so many teams. That position has gotten way more valuable in the past few years than I think it ever has been before. And so while you need to protect your quarterback, it's not like the Chargers have a guy that can play left and right tackle. They don't have a glaring hole there, you know what I mean? Same for the Giants. The Titans have a glaring hole at tackle, so Joe Alt is going to fill that. Next, we have the Falcons, who really, really helped themselves out by signing Kirk Cousins, and they pretty much completed their offense. They've got Drake London, Darnell Mooney. They signed another guy. I can't. His name is and Rondell Moore. So they've got a nice complete offense with Kirk Cousins at the helm. I don't know who they have playing. Oh, and they got Kyle Pitts, of course, at tight end, and then Bijan Robinson. So it's going to be a good offense. Their offensive line has been good for the past couple of years. So here the Falcons turn to defense because they still don't have any pass rushers. But that changes when they draft Dallas Turner at number 8 overall. So now we are back to the Bears. And I think for the Bears, had the Vikings traded up at this spot, Rome Odunze would have been available. And a lot of people mock Rome Odunze to the Bears. I think whether he was here or not, um, I could see the Bears going in that direction. But like I said, Keenan Allen still proved he was a number 1 last year. DJ Moore still proved that he was a number 1 last year. I could see Chicago going right wide out, maybe in like the second or third round, but I don't think they're going to do it here. I think they realize that they need some guys to get to the quarterback, so they're going to get Latu at number 9 overall to pair with Montez Sweat. Now we've got the Jets. Here I have the Jets taking Brock Bowers, the fantastic tight end. Again, just getting more weapons for Aaron Rodgers. Bowers can also block. I could see them going offensive line here too, but just because they have such a glaring hole at tight end, and Aaron Rodgers does like having a good tight end, that's the pick I have for the here. Excuse me, sorry. Now we're at number 11, and the Vikings are going to take their guy, J.J. McCarthy, at number 11. Again, there's a lot of different ways the Vikings could go here. They could use some help in their secondary, so I could see them going Terrion Arnold, which is what the Jaguars, need to be paying attention to. However, when you have Sam Darnold as your only quarterback, you are going to take a quarterback in the draft. So, like I said, in this scenario, they don't move up. I don't really think they have to move up because the Broncos and the Raiders are the two teams that are most threatening to take a quarterback. But I don't think either of those teams really have the um, uh, picks or the draft capital to move up ahead of the Vikings to get their guy. So here the Vikings stay put and they still get their guy. So the Broncos, again, no one knows what they're doing at quarterback. There's lots of things saying Sean Payton's willing to give a king's ransom to trade up. And it's like, well, you don't really have a king's ransom to give. You just need to focus on rebuilding your football team. So the Broncos might have to endure some hardships for a little bit. But in this scenario, they go ahead and go with offensive tackle with Alumi Yahweh, Fashino. They take him at number 12 overall to boost their offensive line because Sean Payton's going to like to run the ball. He's a fantastic run blocker, and running the ball will help get them some identity on offense while they look for who's going to be our wide receivers of the future and who's going to be our quarterback of the future. Now we have the Raiders, or really the Broncos, Raiders. This is kind of where the Jags need to like really be paying attention to the draft. Not that we weren't before, but like really dialed in and looking at what's going on. Because the Broncos, I've seen Terrion Arnold mocked to them. To me, there are so many defensive backs in this draft too. You don't need to take a number one cornerback when you already have a number one cornerback. I mean, it would give you a lockdown secondary, right? But the secondary isn't why the Broncos sucked last year. Their offense is why the Broncos sucked last year. So I don't really see the Broncos going Terrion Arnold. However, if they do, number 13, that's where the Jaguars need to be calling the Raiders and looking to move up, right? Even if it costs us, I hope it only costs us a third. It might cost us our second. I would hate that if we had to give our second to move up, but I would hate even worse if we didn't get one of these top two cornerbacks because there's two cornerbacks in this draft that are projected to become cornerback ones that have the skills to do it. That is Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell. So for the Jaguars, we need to make sure that we land one of those two guys. And Broncos are kind of a threat, but they have so many other needs. They need edge, they need offensive tackle, they need quarterback, they need wide receiver now that they got rid of Jerry Jeudy. I don't necessarily think they'll be thinking defensive back at number 12. Raiders, again, they have a huge hole at tackle. So, but they also have a huge hole at cornerback. So they could equally go for either position. In this mock draft, I have the Raiders going Talise Fuaga at number 13 because, again, they don't have a right tackle right now because he left to free agency. So because that whole, it's not just like they have a bad player playing there. Like there's literally no one to play that spot right now. I could see the Raiders going that direction. With the Saints, there's no way they're not going offensive line. And in this case, they take Troy Fatunau at number 14 overall. Then we have the Colts. And the Colts, I feel like it's almost written that they are going to take a cornerback. If you look at their secondary, that's what they're missing. And I think, especially after losing Stephon Gilmore recently, I think they are definitely our biggest threat to take one of the guys that we want. So in this scenario, they take Terrion Arnold, right? And then now it's the Seahawks at number 16. Seahawks already have two good cornerbacks and Tariq Woolen and forget the other guy's name, but they all seem like they're very set at cornerback. So they're gonna take Jared Verse at number 16 overall, which means the Jaguars can take Quinyon Mitchell at number 17 overall. Now, again, I would say if the Broncos take a cornerback, we need to trade up with the Raiders, right? If the Raiders end up taking a cornerback, we need to trade up with the Saints and leapfrog the Colts. As long as we can come off with Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold, the Jaguars will be okay. But those two teams, the Raiders, well, Broncos kind of, but the Raiders, the Colts are almost definitely going to take a cornerback, and the Raiders might. So if they don't, then we're okay. If they don't take it, then we know we can get the guy that we want. There's danger of us being leapfrogged by another team, but I think based upon the teams behind us, I don't think anyone likes the cornerback so much that they're gonna fly up the board and potentially give up a future first round pick just to get, one of these two guys. I'd be willing to give up like a fourth rounder. I tried to do the draft online, but the Saints always rejected whenever I offered a fourth to move from 17 to 14. And I'll feel much more comfortable, but it is what it is. And at the same time, that's something we don't want to tip our hand that we're doing. So we need to let the draft play out, basically. So don't try to move up to 14 on draft before the draft starts. Just see how it plays out. Once you get to 13, and if the Saints are on the clock, you call them and you let them know, hey, I'll give you a fourth round pick so we can move up. We want a cornerback. We know the Colts are going to try to get our guy. So we want to trade you an extra fourth round pick or both fourth round picks if that's what it takes so that we can go get our guy. You guys will still be able to get your tackle because the Colts and the Seahawks both have tackles that are already kind of set in place. So you won't lose your guy and you'll just pick up an extra pick. That's the pitch, and I think the Jaguars have to make it. All right, so next we have the rest of the draft isn't as important, so I'll just kind of fly through it. We've got the Bengals. I have them taking Johnny Newton to, replace DJ Reader, who they lost. Next, the Rams. They're going to try to take Byron Murphy to kind of help mitigate the loss of Aaron Rodgers to retirement. Here, Brian Thomas Jr., he falls to the Steelers. Now, I know a lot of Jags fans want us to take Brian Thomas Jr., and I see the argument for it. And at 17, if both of our cornerbacks are gone, more than likely that means Brian Thomas Jr. is still on the board and we can definitely still take him. Because the Colts, there is a chance that they go wide out, but I think the Colts are kind of stubborn in that way where they're like, we've got guys and we want to keep using them. They like Michael Pierce, Josh Downs, and they like Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, and Josh Downs to be their receivers. So I think Brian Thomas ends up falling. If Stephon Diggs hadn't been traded into our division, maybe I'd feel differently. But I think the Jaguars, like, I wish that Trent Baalke had traded for like L'Jarius Sneed to be like our number one cornerback. But I don't think after that injury, I don't know if Tyson Campbell can really hack it as our number one cornerback. I think he can be a dominant number two cornerback and completely erase a guy. And so if we get one of these rookies on here that has the traits to become a cornerback one in a year where they don't have to ascend to that rank, right? Like they don't have to become cornerback one this year. They can take some time, maybe towards the end of the year, but maybe ascend to like kind of that position. Then not only can we extend Tyson Campbell to a cornerback two type of deal, which usually don't exceed 10 million a year, so we can get him on a nice team friendly deal, maybe do something for like 7 or 8, and establish him as the quarterback as a cornerback two, and then we'll get a really good guy to play QB, CB1, cornerback one, because again, we're going to need to upgrade our cornerback position more so than we need a receiver. Because again, if we look back at 2022 when Trevor Lawrence was coming out, uh, not only did Doug Peterson's offense not really need a number one guy, but Trevor Lawrence didn't need a number one guy. And then, people talk about Trevor hasn't played with like a top 15 receiver. And I get it. And I feel like he should have the opportunity to do so. But I mean, last year we brought in a guy who could be number one, Calvin Ridley, and it wasn't the fireworks we were all expecting because the traits that Trevor Lawrence needs are guys that can get separation. And if you can't get separation, you got to be a contested catch kind of guy. Calvin Ridley was neither of those. He was a great route runner. So sometimes he would get separation when the scheme was right and the route was right, but he's not necessarily a burner. So if he was still being covered, Trevor couldn't really throw it to him. So we need a specific type of receiver to complete our offense. I don't think Brian Thomas Jr. is that guy. I think he's a great receiver, but he's not a big bodied contested catch guy like South Carolina's Xavier Legate, who I would have the Jaguars taking in the second round after this. So that's why I don't have us going wide receiver. Why, even if Brian Thomas Jr. was on the board, if Quinion Mitchell and Terrion Arnold are still up there, I would take them both over Brian Thomas Jr. Now, if they're both gone and they were gone before the Jaguars had a chance to try to trade up and leapfrog Colts, and Brian Thomas Jr. is there, do you go there and then take a cornerback in the second round? You could potentially, but I think our secondary is going to remain a place of weakness if we do that. We need one of these cornerbacks in this draft to maybe become that number one type of guy. So, yeah, so that's why Brian Thomas Jr. ends up falling, but the Steelers stop his slide because they need someone for Justin Fields or Russell Wilson to throw to. Now we've got the Dolphins again, just kind of finishing it out. Dolphins are going to draft Graham Barton. This guy can play all over the offensive line, and the Dolphins need help all over the offensive line. So he can play center, guard, whatever they need for him to help them protect Tua a little bit better. Now we have the Eagles who are going to draft Cooper DeJean. Because I feel like the big problem with the Eagles is that they didn't have a slot guy for last year, so they moved James Bradbury to the slot, but he wasn't good in the slot. And then their outside cornerback also wasn't very good. So instead of fixing a position, they had two really weak positions. So Cooper DeJean comes in and fixes that because he can play anywhere. He can play your number two cornerback. He can play safety. He can play nickel. He would be the kind of guy that I would honestly look for the Jaguars to like take, but we need an outside cornerback and we need a number one outside cornerback. Cooper DeJean isn't that. Like he's good, he's a good nickel, but he's not that number one type of guy. He's just kind of like a do-it-all playmaker in the back end. So here the Vikings, like I said, because they traded down, they still end up getting their guy. They're going to boost their edge with Chop Robinson after losing to Neil Hunter and Marcus Davenport. The Cowboys are going to go ahead and get J.C. Latham. They need another offensive tackle because, as good as their line has been, their guys are now retiring. The Packers, David Bakhtiari gets hurt so much. I'm not even sure if he's still on the team. So the Packers are going Amarius Mims. Um, at tackle to draft right there in that spot at number 25 overall. Next, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And here I kind of went back and forth because I was like, they could almost go cornerback because, they lost Carlton Davis. They traded him away. However, based upon their center retired and I don't know if they have a guard right now. In the interest of protecting their new investment of Baker Mayfield, they're going to go Jackson Powers Johnson. Jackson Powers Johnson for them. Now we have the Cardinals. So since they picked an amazing receiver to help throw the ball to, now they need someone who can help stop really good receivers. So they're going to go with Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, the speedy guy. If the if the Vikings end up trading number 23 and 11 to move up to 4, in that case, the Cardinals, I think, would end up with Rome Odunze at number 11, even if that means they have to like leapfrog and trade up with the Falcons or something, like trade maybe a second to get up there to make sure they get Rome Odunze. But they would have ended up with him. At number 23, the Cardinals would have been the ones taking Chop Robinson. And I think either way at number 27, they end up taking Nate Wiggins. So if the Vikings make that trade, the Cardinals get a chance to address three key positions. But either way, that's how it goes down. So now at number 28 overall, and if the Steelers hadn't taken Brian Thomas Jr., the Bills definitely would have loved to have him here. But instead, they go Adonai Mitchell, a guy who has a lot of traits, as they talk about, but just don't really know if he can be that number one guy. And that's exactly what the Bills need because they just lost their top two receivers. So we'll see. Ironically, both to the AFC South. Now the Lions, pretty obvious how they're going to go here. They tried to sign a bunch of guys at free agency, didn't quite work. They traded for Carlton Davis, who gets hurt so much. I think he's more just like kind of a band-aid or something. But they gave up a hefty price for him with a third-round pick. So here they're going to take Kool-Aid McKinstry, a guy that they probably Alabama guy who they hope can develop into their cornerback one, maybe. But only time will tell. Next, the Ravens are going to draft Tyler Guyton. They lost Morgan Moses in the offseason and Ronnie Stanley. I don't know if he's ever played a full season since he got his contract. So they need to keep protecting Lamar Jackson and be able to blow up in holes for him. Here at number 31, this is kind of a reach for the 49ers because it was kind of hard for me to decide where they go because I could see them going tackle and you still got, Kingsley, um, Kingsley from BYU on the board. You still have Jordan Morgan. But I have them going Darius Robinson to kind of get a pass rushing element to complement Nick Bosa because their guys, Drake Jackson, haven't really panned out. And after making two trades to bolster their edge position, they decided to get a guy in the draft to help bolster that edge position. Here with the Chiefs, originally with the Chiefs, when they had Rashid Rice, I didn't think they needed to go receiver here, especially after signing Marquise Brown. I thought they could have gone tackle or guard because I think one of their tackles is leaving. But because of that, I have them going Xavier Worthy right here at number 32 because we know what happened to Rashid Rice, and he may not be playing in the NFL after that. So that's the full draft. I could also see the Chiefs going tackle there too. Those last two picks aren't really as concerning for us. So that's the full draft. And again, the reason why it's good to mock the entire first draft is because the Jaguars need to know where other teams are leaning to make sure that we can get our guy. So, like I said, the Raiders, the Colts, kind of the Broncos are all threats to take cornerbacks before us. So that's something we got to pay attention to and make sure, if necessary, go up and get above them. As far as people that could trade up, I really don't see the first cornerback after us going until 22 with the Eagles. And I think the Eagles would be content to stay put and take Cooper DeJean. I don't really think that the Eagles are a threat to try to leap above us. Like, they could try to trade with the Seahawks if they also want one of those two guys, Terrion Arnold or Quinion Mitchell. So that's something to look for as well, because the Eagles could try to trade up. As far as everyone else that would be taking cornerback, I don't think the Cardinals would be willing to trade up 10 spots plus to get their cornerback at number 27. And I don't think the Lions would be willing to do that either. So those aren't really threats to us as the Jaguars because, um, again, I don't think they would trade that much just to go get one of those top two cornerbacks when they still have other things. Now, the Lions, they don't have a whole lot of needs besides their secondary, so there's a chance that they could. But I think they'll be okay with Kool-Aid McKinstry because there are some good first round guys in this draft. As far as Nate Wiggins and Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think they're going to be good players that we could potentially take at 17, but I don't think that those are the kind of players that we're going to need to. I think those players have the chance to be like really good cornerback twos, but I don't think they have the chance to become like an elite cornerback one, a shutdown kind of guy. Like those guys look like Tyson Campbell's, right? And we kind of need a guy that's better than Tyson Campbell. And as far as the receivers go, like I said, I would, if the Jaguars had traded for L'Jarius Sneed, we could be talking about, okay, we're going to use our second round pick to trade up. It would really help us out if the Vikings decided to trade up to number 4 and get that cornerback, because that would have pushed some of the top receivers down, and we could have tried to leap in a few spots. I would even be willing to trade a first from next year if it meant that we could leap up and get one of those top 3 receivers. But now, because of where we are, because we need that number 1 shutdown cornerback, I think it's better if we just stay put. In the second round, there will be some guys there. I'm not sure if Xavier Legate will still be there because a lot of teams like him, because I love him. He's built like Michael Pittman, T. Higgins, AJ Brown, some of the great second round draft picks. But that would be my target for us in the second round. And I think he can have a very similar impact on our offense, like I said, as that contested catch guy. So thank you guys for joining me on our first round mock draft. Um, I'll talk to you next time. And yeah, we'll tune in on draft night to see exactly how it all goes down. Take care.